This is the Art of Network Engineering podcast. In this podcast, we'll explore tools, technologies, and talented people. We aim to bring you information that will expand your skill sets and toolbox and share the stories of fellow network engineers.
Hello there, welcome to Dan's Notorious Sandwiches, home of the spicy tomato and pickle, or the old STP as I like to call it. What can we get going for you today?
Hello, may I have a cheesesteak with fried onions and ketchup, please?
Excellent choice. Dan, we need a 192.168.1.10 up here.
What in the Sam hell is that?
Oh, you see Dan back there makes the best sandwiches in the world, but he only takes orders in dotted decimal numbers. I don't get it, but again, dude makes the best sandwiches in the world, so we deal with it. Anyway, I developed this system where I translate customers' orders in word form into the numbers that please Dan. I named it after the shop, Dan's Notorious Sandwiches, so I'm calling it DNS. It's pretty unprecedented if you ask me. I can't imagine there's anything like this in any industry. Once the word gets out, I'm pretty sure I'll have lots of people knocking on this door wanting to talk to me about it. Well, here's your order. Ack! Thanks, Dan. He makes me say ack every time he hands me an order, too. I don't get that either. Oh, look, he threw one of them spicy pickle johns in there for you, too. Have a nice day. And if you got a minute, stop next door and see my friends at the Art of Network Engineering.
Yes. Oh, my God. That was beautiful. Oh, no. Come on. Leave the hat on.
Oh, you gotta leave it on. Come on.
Oh, I am AJ Murray. That was Tim Bertino. Tim, man, you got this amazing talent. You're a gifted person, and I'm so glad we got you here. How you doing?
Sandwich time, man.
Sandwich time. I'm hungry now. I'm
doing good, AJ. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Very well. Today is my older son's birthday. I have two boys. I have an older son, and a younger son.
Happy birthday, little Blinky.
He turned 17 today.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
So you giving him the truck?
No. No way. He can't drive yet. He doesn't have a driver's license yet. He's taking driver's ed this year.
Nice.
So he listens to the show from time to time. I hope he hears this episode. So happy birthday, son. Awesome. What I love about his birthday, and I'm not saying this for any sort of recognition here, but his birthday is today, and my birthday is tomorrow. So it's really cool that we're like birthday adjacent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, how old are you gonna be?
Old enough, Dan.
That's always my question.
But still not 40.
Women around here.
I'm still less than 40. So
how old are you and how much you weigh?
I've never asked them how much they weighed.
I'll tell you my age before I tell you my weight.
Adil says it's your birthday where he is. He's traveling.
That's
yeah.
Go get a drink.
Happy birthday, AJ.
Nice.
Happy birthday, AJ.
Awesome.
Nice.
Excellent. Andy, how are you?
Hey, man. I'm good. I fell off my bike on Labor Day, but I avoided the hospital and I'm all bandaged up. And, I'm just looking for sympathy. So I'm telling you that. But
I kiss your boo-boo, but you're far away.
Oh, thanks. I'm just amazed that the intros get better every week. I don't know how he's doing it. But
I love
it's amazing.
You're a hell of a co-star. You made me laugh.
What in the Sam Hill?
Happy to help.
I would have hit a wall like after the first episode, the first intro. Be like, that's it, guys. That's all I got.
Oh man. Well, I think we're gonna rotate the chair a little bit here, and we're gonna let Tim take the reins. So, Tim, she's all yours. You have the con.
I don't know what that means.
That means you're in control of the ship.
I think I skipped that book in middle school.
What does he have? Did you say he has the bong?
He has the con. Jesus, you guys ever watch Star Trek? Jesus Christ.
Oh, I thought you said the conch. Isn't that Lord of the Flies or something like that?
Yeah, I think.
Need some help from the Patreons. I said, I skipped that
Yeah,
English class that day.
Yeah, I think the conch
Ask
shell
the
is Lord
audience.
of the Flies, right?
Ask the audience.
I don't know. I always heard
All
it.
right, let's
Chris
jump
says
into
you
these
have the
wins.
console. Sorry.
Help me out, Andy.
Oh, dear Lord.
AJ wanted to see how many names I could mispronounce this week. So I just want to thank the people coming up in the winning. The names that I'm looking at, phenomenal. I should be able to get these ones.
Lucky.
Up first, Jordan gets ahead. Jordan accepted a new role as a technical support engineer at an MSP, which is Jordan's second role in IT. Congrats.
Good job. Good job.
Very nice. Very nice.
Excellent.
And now we have Bill version 3, or Bill V3 for short, passed the CWNA, Certified Wireless Network Administrator. Excellent.
Nice.
And last but not least in the list, Track It Pacer is getting a promotion at work and moving off the overnight shift at the end of the month.
That's big.
Good
That's
job.
big.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Very,
That's
very,
huge.
very
I
exciting.
used to work the midnight shift a long time ago.
I worked the midnight shift for a year. It almost killed me. I'm very happy for her. She's getting off of that shift.
Yeah, lots
Good
of
for her.
respect for sure.
You guys ever
Yeah,
see her
awesome.
stuff? She posts these like one pagers, like the 1-page study guides. She did one on DMVPN. It's like, this shit is lit.
Yeah, the shit
Yeah, those
posts
are
are
great.
hilarious.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. Congrats.
Was she the one that was talking about throwing a or no. She was, I don't know, 6500 chassis. She was trying to come up with some shit post for that, wasn't she?
Yep.
I think that was her. Yeah.
She came out of nowhere and she's got so much good content. She has these, she streams herself studying for an RC and she's smart. She's funny. The material annoys her, which I really appreciate. It's a very fun.
It's a really
she-
interesting take.
It really is. Check out Track and Pacer on Twitter, and she has a whatever it's called, RPAN, like a study streaming thing. It's informative. I've walked around just listening because it helps me because I'm supposed to be studying this stuff. So just listening to somebody talk about technology is helpful. But it's also very entertaining. So yeah, Track and Pacer, up and comer, big time.
And then finally, we have a new Patreon to welcome, F. Smith. Thanks for joining the team. We really appreciate it.
Yay.
Nice, thank you. Rock on.
All right,
Thank you
let's
to all of our
hear the
Patreons.
goat.
Yeah.
And just remember, for all your VPN needs, you can turn to NordVPN, nordvpn.com/TAONE, or use the promo code TAONE at checkout to get 73% off the 2-year plan plus 4 months. Check out NordVPN.
You guys
All right,
use
fellas.
NordVPN?
What's that?
Do you guys use NordVPN?
Yes, sir.
I did check it out, yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. What's your favorite part about it?
It's a VPN.
Dan took my answer.
I like that it makes me invisible and I can
Right.
be free.
My
I mean,
ISP is only going to see my traffic going to the other end of that tunnel, and that's it. Can't see my traffic.
yeah,
That's right.
And
That's
and
right.
As long as you're careful to not leak your DNS, you are invisible. It is wonderful.
Like, how do you do you just does a leak happen? How does that work?
It happens to me all the time, Dan. I don't really want to talk about it.
So my understanding is you just can't use your ISP's DNS servers because they're going to see, if you have Comcast as an example and they send you their router,
Yeah.
I think by default the DNS is going to happen with the Comcast DNS servers. So that means every time you go to, I don't know, I heard once like something about piratebay.com or something, like a place for torrents. When you put that in your browser, back to Tim's intro, the DNS requests will go out to your ISP and they'll go, oh, he's trying to get to a torrent site. Let me give him an IP while I'm at it, log it, and turn him into the FBI so he can go to jail.
I got you.
So that's what DNS. So you can use DNS. I believe Nord has their own DNS servers, which are anonymous. They don't log. The big thing about Nord that I love is they don't log anything. Because there have been cases where the authorities go to a VPN provider and say, hey, we're looking into this guy. We want to see all his stuff. And Nord is one of those companies. They log nothing and there's nothing to get. So you're truly anonymous. So they're doing it right. There's some VPN providers out there that do log, tell you they log, and they'll say, oh, we're never going to release these, but
A subpoena will change that real quick.
Yeah, pretty quick. So that's why I like Nord. What do you like about it, AJ? They got a lot of add-on features too, right?
Yeah, they got some good stuff. I think I brought this up before, but I got to mention it again. They got this dark web part of their service where they will look online in the dark web for anything that's kind of like tied to your account that you used to sign up for NordVPN. And I was checking it out, and lo and behold, I had a notification that there was a leak, and it contained my email address and password combination credentials. And I was able to go to that service, change my password, and then unfortunately, it was not a service that used 2FA. So I did have to go change the password to be safe. And then you can clear it. You can, tell Nord that you've taken care of that. And that way it's kind of like off the to-do list. So no, it's good stuff. I like it. They have like a quick connect feature too. You can just tap quick connect and away you go. Or, you can scroll through the list. They've got like, I don't know, I think it's well over 50 different endpoints that you can VPN into. And then like you can save them. They have ones that are like, tuned for fast download or peer-to-peer sharing, depending on what you're trying to do. Right. I'm using NordVPN right now on my computer as I'm recording the show, and I can't tell a difference. I've never been able to tell a difference whenever I've been using this service. So I think they do a great job.
See, I wanted to ask you that, AJ. Is that something you run on personal computer and mobile devices at all times? Or do you just turn it on at certain times, like if you're out in a public place? Or
Yeah, I mean, I tend to turn it on when I leave the house. When I'm home, I don't really care. I mean, I know my ISP can see my stuff, but I'm not doing anything stupid. So I trust my own home network. I know what I'm doing on here. It's all Meraki stuff because I took the training and I got the free gear. So I can see what I'm doing. But I'm the only one that's watching what I'm doing, at least on my home network, right? Once at least my home network hits the ISP network, and they're probably watching me. But again, I'm not doing anything that I wouldn't want someone else to know about or see.
And
so.
I just want to add, I'm not going to get on like a privacy soapbox, but it's not just about doing stupid things.
Sure.
There have been federal cases where there was wiretapping stuff going on, and they found out, and the Supreme Court said, no, you cannot spy on everybody. And again, not a political show, but everything's being surveilled all the time, and it seems to just be fine. So if you don't want everybody listening and watching to everything you're doing, on the internet, NordVPN is a great way to become anonymous on the internet. If you value privacy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Keeping an honest person honest. There you go, Chris.
I like that.
I thought Dan just came up with that. I'm like, Dan, the way he said that too, like that was majestic as hell.
He's reading the Patreon chat.
I was reading a script over here.
Man, he stepped back, that look on his face. I'm like, I thought that just popped in his head. Man.
Yeah, it popped on the screen.
That's awesome.
That's an excellent side chat. Let's get into it here, fellas. In this episode, we are talking about something that probably all of us and most of us in the Patreon channel as well are very, very passionate about. We're going to be talking about home labs.
I thought you were going to say beer. Sorry.
What home labs are, why do we need them, what do they consist of, that kind of thing. So I want to kick this over to Andy to start. Andy.
Oh, come on.
What? Come on, bro. You talk about this all the time. Andy, what are home labs and why do we need them?
So my understanding of what a home lab would be for, let's say, constrained it to network engineering would be you would have your own, say, routers and switches at home, and you could configure a network, you could configure protocols, you can break things and not have them affect, production or your wife at home working from home. Like, what the hell did you do to the internet? So, a home lab I've also used for syntax, maybe before a change to throw something through there to, depending on the iOS you're running and blah, 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 there's different commands. I have, so I guess that's the front definition of it, right? Is a home lab. And I'll tell you that in my last role on my last team, there wasn't any funding for a real lab at work. So I built a home lab and mimicked our WAN setup.
Yeah.
And then configured the port forwarding so that my whole team could get into my lab. And if anybody wanted to get in there and lab stuff out, they could. We've since got access to a lab at work. But I use my home lab and try to help our team at work for labbing changes. So that's my quick definition there. How'd I do, Tim?
Well, because you just already answered my next question.
Sorry.
What I've seen home labs used a lot for is certification-based training.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I was going to ask you, is that the only use case for them? You kind of answered that, and the answer is no, and that you can use them to help yourself kind of get more immersed in things that you're dealing with at work as well. So that was really cool, especially cool that you did that and helped your team out and made everybody better. That was awesome.
And I was thinking as a starting point, we could even define, what is labbing? Why is it important? It may seem obvious to a lot of listeners, but there could be people out there just getting started in their journeys. Maybe they have packet tracer, maybe they don't, or somebody who's looking to pivot. They heard about the CCNA and they heard, why would you even, want a lab? And I was thinking back just personally, I think the first time I ever labbed in my life was probably in college in chemistry. You'd sit in lecture and you'd learn about, I don't know I forget all of it, right? But a titration of copper, I don't even remember what it was. But after you would learn it in the book, then you would go to a lab and put on your lab coat and goggles and stuff. And then you would actually do things with compounds and apply the knowledge from the book to real world application. And for me, that always made the concept stick. There's something about processing it in that tactile real world application, the information that I think makes it stick in your brain other than just consuming, material. So, you can apply it to what we do, right? When I was learning about BGP, I could not remember the commands, but because I was doing them in a lab over and over, and there's something about that repetition and that application and the muscle memory and the keyboarding that just it kind of gets stuck in your brain. So, for me, I can't really remember stuff long term unless I lab it. That's just been my experience. And
so,
I think we should.
So from a network perspective, it's not just going through books and memorizing commands. You're actually applying what you learned from the books and repeating those commands and practicing them over and over again in physical real gear, right?
Yeah, when I made EIGRP neighbor up between two routers, and then I got route sharing across them, and then I had an OSPF domain over here, and I started redistributing. It made the technology come alive to me, which got me excited. When I built it and I saw it, I was like, whoa, because it just seemed a lot. I don't know, look what I did. Wow,
I made fire.
Right. It's beyond rote memorization. It's the application of the knowledge that when you're interviewing, and that's what I've always. I know you started with me because I'm like the guy who likes to annoy people about labs, but I think the best application of labbing and networking is that person trying to get their first job, trying to get their foot in the door, and it's the chicken and egg scenario. And how do you get experience without the job? You can get all the experience you would ever want or need in a home lab and make all these protocols bow to your every whim. And when you're sitting in that interview, you've never worked on a production, environment. Give me a console, give me some gear. I'll make it hum for you. Tell me what you need. You can get that confidence because you've done it. Otherwise, you feel like an imposter and you're like, well, yeah, you just have my CCNA and maybe I'm not good enough. But that lab, for me, really gave me a lot of confidence interviewing. And I brought it up in my interview for the job I have now. I tried to play up the fact that I had a home lab and I had production gear at home and here's all the stuff I did. And because I was trying to overcome that hurdle of not having actual build experience, how do you get over that hump? So that helped me.
So I want to stick with the physical lab for a little bit. And this question's really open-ended to any of you guys. When you have built home labs with physical gear, how did you know what to get for a lab and where did you go get it?
Research.
Yeah. Jeremy Chara.
Yeah.
Jeremy Chara was a good one.
He was all about the lab, and he told me to go get 3 2620 XMs, and they're old and they run all the protocols, and it was like $75 for 3 of them, and that's what I did. Jeremy had a whole series on labs and all kinds of blogs on labs. He was all about the lab, and Jeremy was the one who told me that's that You know, if you go to a surgeon, you don't want a guy who's, you know, just watched videos, and you want somebody with experience. To him, it was all about, you got to get somebody with experience. A lab gives you experience with the protocols, with the technology, and you can get down to the physical layer. I have fought for weeks a pinout on a rollover or a crossover, or, you know, you name it. And there are lessons you don't forget. And when you're working with DC ops folks years later as a remote engineer, like I am, when we hit a physical issue, it strikes a chord, it, you know, tweaks a neuron, it gets me in their head, and I can start to walk through that. All right, let's look at this as the pinout. You have a tester. You can walk your way up the stack, because remember in CCNA they told me like 70% of network issues are physical. I don't know if that's still true, but getting good at the physical layer, by the numbers, statistically, you can solve 70-ish% of the problems.
I was going to
So
say L2 issues.
Yeah, right. But and let's not, you know, we can go to physical, but we'd almost want to start at Packet Tracer, right? It's all you need.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's free. It'll get you through the CCNA. It'll get you that muscle memory.
That's where I
Yeah.
wanted to go next. So
Yeah.
let's pivot to people that are just starting out. Let's say that they're trying to get into Cisco, they're trying to get into the CCNA, or just networking in general. What's that first step for somebody who doesn't want to go jump on eBay and try to go get some physical gear?
So I think the big elephant in the room is physical versus virtual, right?
Let's hear it, Dan.
Well, I have a different opinion. I think if you're starting out in this career, you know, a lot of people say, what's the cheapest way to get into it, right? Well, you know, I think there should be a different kind of mindset on that, because you're talking about investing in yourself. And, you know, how much is a college degree, right? Like, that's kind of all over the board, but you're talking about thousands of dollars, right? So if you're going to go the path of certifications, you know, spend a couple $100s on yourself and your education, and you're going to get that hands-on learning with the physical lab. You don't have to do everything physical, right? You can mix physical with virtual. You can definitely get like some kind of ESXi server type thing. I've got a Dell R6 something, I don't remember, but you can get, you know, RAM, CPU count. Those are the big things. Not so much storage, but you can spin up little virtual machines, and you can connect that to your physical gear as well. And so I think it. What I'm getting at is, I think you need to invest in yourself a little bit. But if you are trying to do it as cheap as possible, yeah, you can get Cisco's Packet Tracer. I'm pretty sure you can get that for free, right? Like, you just have to
Absolutely free.
sign up an
Yep.
account with
Netacad.com.
yeah, exactly. And it's changed a lot too. Like, back when I used it, it was nowhere near as pretty as it is now.
Yeah.
That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I think it's gotten a lot better.
But
Tons.
Packet Tracer is a, hold on, I'm going to get these words wrong. It's not an emulator, right?
I think it's a simulator,
Simulator,
Yep,
right?
simulator.
right?
Yeah.
I think it might be running Java on the back end. I could be wrong, but it's simulating the environment. It's not actually running
Exactly.
the code, right?
And so the big difference between that is kind of what Andy was just saying, right? Like, it's not actually running the iOS, right? It's just simulating, if you put that
Feels like
command
it.
in, what it would do.
Mhm.
And so there's the difference between that, a simulator, and an emulator. And an emulator would be more like GNS3 or even G. And even G is kind of what I've been going to now. But anyways, Packet Tracer is free. You can get started on your CCNA for sure with that. I think you could probably do everything CCNA level in Packet Tracer. Would you guys agree with that? Or
I was just going to
Yeah.
say that, Dan. I want to echo
Okay.
both the things that you and Andy just said about Packet Tracer. Right? I think that is a great way to get into it. I don't want people to feel like they have to, in order to get started, they have to go get the physical lab. I do think that there are a lot of positives to that, but that can definitely be part of your long game. You don't have, I mean, that shouldn't be the barrier to entry for you. And I will say, I haven't done the new CCNA curriculum, but the one that they just sunset a couple of years ago, that was the last one I got. And I think out of the blueprint, I was able to lab all but like one concept on Packet Tracer. I was like, I don't even remember what it was, but there was one concept that I went to a couple physical switches for, but everything else was packet tracer, and it's definitely come a long way.
Packet tracer is plenty, I think, to get you the labbing you need for the CCNA. I think where the rubber would meet the road between packet tracer and either a physical or virtual lab, I keep hearkening back to like trying to get that first job, trying to show people you have experience. I used packet tracer for CCNA and it was a godsend and wonderful, and I can't say enough good things about it. But I don't think it's going to carry, I don't want to say it's not going to carry any weight, but running a simulator, in my opinion, is nowhere near as good as an emulated or an actual environment.
I agree.
And I mean, you're going to pay $400 for the CCNA exam, give or take, right? I don't know how much they're up to now, but you can build a physical home lab for $200 if you want. 2 routers, 2 switches, and you're in. So if you can afford the CCNA exam, you might be able to afford, a little bit of gear. For me, it was an evolution. I started with packet tracer because that's what Netacad told me to use, and I didn't know any better, and I did, and it got me my CCNA. And then I got a job at the NOC, and all those guys were older dogs, heavy hitters, and they all got in my face and were like, "Dude, you need to build a physical lab right now."
Yeah,
because that's what they all did, and they knew the benefits of it. So that's what I did, and then I upgraded that a couple times. I had the 2600s, I got 1800s, 1900s, 2900. I had every darn old school, sunset router that was out there, 3550 switches, got layer 3 on there. Yay, and then I got fortunate enough to get a server from work, HP DL, whatever the heck it was, Perliant, whatever it was. But then, like to your point, Dan, I started to learn, and I think I bothered AJ at this point. I think we knew each other by then, but how do I get a hypervisor on there, and how do I get ESXi on, and why would I do that? Well, because now I can run virtual environments, I can run Eve, I can run GNS. Like I don't know much about CML. I think that's a different thing. Maybe we can touch that in a minute. But by learning, by having a server and virtualizing my networking lab, it forced me to learn virtualization technologies, and not only learn them but apply them, fight through the hardware. I had such a hard time with the drivers, and I just could not get it working, and it was such a pain. But I learned so much by standing up that server, getting the hypervisor up, and I'll use both. If I have to lab now at home, I usually just log into my Eve that sits on my server as a VM. I have the physical gear down there in the rack in case, because for me, I don't know if I heard this, but physical gear don't lie. You know what I mean? There are goofy bugs. Like if you're running a virtual 9K in EVE-NG, don't get me started. I'll go on a rant. You can get something like BFD enabled, configured, but it'll never work. And you might spend hours or weeks trying to troubleshoot why it isn't working, only to find out it's not a supported feature. So, real gear will not lie. It will run that iOS on those ASICs and work. But that's my only gripe with the virtualized environments is you're not 100% sure it's exactly correct.
Right.
But it's close enough, right?
And that's kind of like so some of our Patreons they're kind of talking about that right now. They're I think it's Jordan said basically like you turn on a physical router and it's on. There's no learning curve on trying to figure out the virtual side of it and all that. You turn the router on, it's on. There you go. So that's a good point, Jordan.
I want to add to that as well with what Andy was getting into and what you just said, Dan, with building that virtual lab. Adil said that as well. He said, I'm all for virtual, but it can be hard to configure initially. Do you guys think that that's a barrier to entry that kind of turns people off? Or do you think there's a lot of people that, Andy, take your stance where I'm going to tackle that because that's just another skill I can add on by picking up virtualization?
I think it depends on where you are in your career.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was
if you have a certain amount of technical aptitude, if you've been exposed to virtualization technology, it depends, right? Like, I think that for somebody just starting out in IT or network engineering and telling them to go get like an ESXi server, set it up, do all that, like that's going to be overwhelming and scare them away, right? Like if they have a mentor that can help them with that stuff, great. Yeah. But I think it might be just a tough pill to swallow for somebody just starting out.
if they're a member of a Discord community with 1,700 members that would be happy to help them, myself included, stand up a server. I mean, right? That's what the community's about.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
well, I'll make a video for you. Like, you know, I would, but totally, AJ. I mean, it is intimidating, and it could be a barrier to entry. But I also feel like there's a personality type, or at least an intrinsic personality to people, or an intrinsic curiosity
Mhm.
in our personalities with people like us. That's
Mhm.
why we do what we
Yeah.
do for a living, right? So if you're plagued by curiosity like I am, it's not that big of a deal to have this server you're not exactly sure what to do. You have Google, you have YouTube, you have communities and
Mhm.
people like us that can help. And to your point, Tim, I think it's just going to make. I'm trying to look at the blueprint now. I don't know if virtualization is in the new CCNA blueprint. I know it's in the CCNP blueprint,
Mhm.
but if it's in the blueprint, you might do yourself a favor by but it's going to take time, right? And it's going to take, you know, I don't know how much time you have, and you can't hurt, like, the deeper you go, you can't hurt yourself with more experience, right? So it's like, how much time do you have? What kind of resources do you have? Are you just trying to get your CCNA? Get Packet Tracer and make your life easier, right? Because the
Yeah.
CCNA is a big enough mountain to climb if you're especially new to all this.
Well, I think there's so kind of what I'm hearing is like if you're just breaking into it and you're not 100% sure that you know this is the direction you want to go, probably start with Packet Tracer, right?
Yeah,
That way
right.
you can just drag and drop a router in there and a switch and whatnot, and start with some iOS commands. And then if it starts like if you start, you know, that excites you and everything like that, then maybe the next step is to step up to go get a couple of actual routers, get a couple of switches, you know, hook them suckers up, you know, make an Ethernet cable,
Mhm.
you know, start doing that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then from there, if that excitement keeps going, start digging into virtualization, you know. I think someone said in here earlier that with virtualization you can scale. I mean, that's 100% true, right? Because if
Yeah.
you go buy 6 routers, I mean, now you've got all that gear that you've got to run it. It gets hot, you know.
Everybody I know studying for the CCIE, it's just a virtualized
Yeah.
environment,
Yeah.
right? And they just drag
Yep.
all that stuff in there, and you know they got the horse, but you could never buy all that gear. I mean, you could, but why would you? It'd be
Right.
awful.
Yeah,
Try to build all that.
inexpensive. I mean,
Yeah, very in power and heat and all that stuff,
Yeah.
right?
so,
I want to mention this too. The first time I touched Linux was trying to figure out my terminal server. I have an Avocent terminal server in my home lab that, again,
Mhm.
the guys at the NOC told me, you know, get a handful of routers and switches, get a terminal server that plugs into each of the consoles. You can jump, you know, between them so you don't have to keep moving the console cable. And when I got that thing home and turned it on, I'm like, what is this? I had never seen Linux. I didn't know. And there was a base config you had to put on there, you know, and that was another thing I wrestled with for a long time. So there, you know, if you have the time and you want the experience, and again, at that point in my career, I had been a network engineer at a big ISP knock for a year. I wasn't like just starting at getting my CCM.
Mhm.
You know, I think there's a progression, but it forced me to learn Linux. I got the darn thing working. I occasionally have to touch, you know, Linux at work now, and I get to build, you know, at the very least, I can navigate through the tree and the structure and know how to find things and get in directories and blah, 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 you know, very basic Linux stuff. But my first experience with Linux, my first introduction was trying to figure out a device in my home lab.
yeah.
Just something you'd never learn, you know, in Packet Tracer, in GNS, in Eve necessarily. You know, they're all wonderful tools, like you said, Dan, for scale, right? Perfect for ease, just drag and drop stuff. I loved Eve because of its multi-vendor support. I think other people like GNS are doing it now, but I
Yeah.
believe Eve was kind of first to market with that. Like you can build Juniper out, you can build. I mean, the list of vendors that Eve supports is pretty impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, in also something just came up in my head to expand on. You were talking about, you know, if you have a virtual server, that's another thing for you to learn, right? Virtual technologies and stuff like that. Another thing too is if you're in the mood, you can with like GNS3. So the way that GNS3 used to work, I haven't touched it in a long time. So if it doesn't still work this way, then I apologize. But GNS3 you could spin up a virtual machine and that was the server, right? And then you had a client on your machine that you connected to the GNS3 server with. And that's how you know, dragged and dropped your routers in there and whatnot. Well, another thing you could have done with that is, and this is AJ and I actually started doing this way back in the day. We spun up a AWS server. So I went and, signed up, you made an AWS account, right? And then I spun up an AWS server and I put GNS3 server on that. And then AJ and I would take our clients from our computers at our houses and connect to that server. And then that's how we had our GNS3 set up that way. So in the process, I learned a little bit of AWS as well. So the sky's the limit when it comes to home labs. And it doesn't actually, we're talking about virtualization in AWS. Well, that's technically not in my home, right? So home lab can, you can use that word however you want, but
Your home lab doesn't have to be in your home, right?
I was going to say,
exactly.
Is that the phrase now? The home is where your VM is?
Yeah. Exactly.
So I think we've tossed around a lot of stuff. So let's back up. Let's go, 50,000 foot view here, right? Like we talked about Packet Tracer. Packet Tracer is from Cisco. It's available from the Cisco Network Academy. This is the fail fast, fail cheap option, right? Like if you just want to get started, if you don't have any experience and you want to play, Packet Tracer is the way to go. Okay. Physical lab. What have you guys heard is like the recommendation for devices? I've heard 3 to 4 routers and like 3 to 4 switches. If you can swing it, you get 3 to 4 layer 3 switches. So that way you have a total of 8 devices that can do routing, right?
Yep. That's what I built.
And that's like the ideal, CCNA level lab.
Yeah. Well, I think really 2 routers for CCNA level, right?
You could, but then you can't redistribute anything. You need a third.
Well, you're not
just
doing
as an example, right, Dan?
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, you could do, and I don't know if you need to know redistribution in CCNA, but like that's what comes to mind. Like why I'm like, oh yeah, I need a third because I can't redistribute between 2. All you need is 2 for the CCNA, most definitely.
Yeah, probably.
Now, what kind of routers? Because in my home lab, I've got 2821s and I've got 1941s.
So I would say the new curriculum is based off of iOS 15. So any device that you go get for your lab should be capable of running iOS 15. If it runs iOS 12, that's fine. I think older devices like the 2000 series are going to run iOS 12. Some command syntax has changed between 12 and 15. You just have to be aware of that. You're not really tested a ton. Like there's no simulations in the new exams, but you will get syntax related questions, right? Like what's the proper syntax to execute to fix the problem that you see here on your screen kind of thing. So anything you get should run iOS 15. So we're talking 2900 series routers, ISRs, 2960 series switches, and then 3750s, 3850s, but that's probably still going to be a little more expensive because those are still, I think those are still supported. They're not end of life yet.
So I'm looking at eBay right now, and let's see here, 3750 is roughly, let's see here, about 60 to 70 bucks, and that's a 24 port. Yeah, 24 port right there. So yeah, 24 port. That's all you need. You don't have to have a 48 port switch. 3750. 24 PS, they want $60 for it on eBay. So that's kind of what you're.
Yep. No, I was going to say, now you're going to make me check. I don't even know what code's running on mine.
Yeah.
I even have 15 on there. Excuse me while I hit my remote power management here and turn my home lab on. So
I got that too. I love it.
So I can go check my.
Fancy.
Hang on. Turn your VPN on first.
It's always on, brother.
Oh, okay.
NordVPN.
Yeah. So you can get layer 2 switches. The 2960s, I think, are a great option. Like having a layer 2 switch is better than not having any switch, right? So I personally have 2 layer 2 switches. I have 2 2960 S's. I have 2 3750s, and I have 4 ISR 2Ks. So I've got like 3 2911s and 1 2901. I got the 2960 S's for free. So that's why I have 2 layer 2 switches. The caveat I would say is that there are some switches that run a version of iOS called LAN Lite, and LAN Lite is not going to do everything you need to do for CCNA. It will
Okay.
do probably 80 to 85%, but there's going to be some things that Landlight just can't do.
Okay, so be on the lookout for that
Yeah,
if you're.
and if you get a switch that has Landlight, it's not like you can upgrade it because the problem there is flash capacity. You're not going to be able to get like the full iOS and put it on a Landlight switch.
All I was really running switches for, see, I only needed, and like you were saying, Dan, they're pretty cheap. Like you can get 3550s. I don't know if they're $50 a piece or even less now, but I even made the guy an offer and he cut a person and it cut me like 20, $30 off the price. Like, hey, if I buy 3 or 4, do I get a deal? So I got them for a really good price. And all I was using them for was spanning tree. I wanted to see the ports blocked and what they did. I wanted to bundle, ports into an ether channel and see what happened. And it's, I know that the blueprints have changed since I was studying switching, but as far as I needed, I really just needed spanning tree. I wanted to see spanning tree. I wanted to see loops. I wanted to, put some ether channel together. I didn't need anything too fancy. They were layer 3. I could run BGP on them, but I wasn't. I really just wanted them for spanning tree and ether channel.
Another great option though is you can just go get you an old 4510 and with 348 port line cards.
What you got there behind you there, Dan?
No. I mean, I use that. No, I'm joking. You definitely don't need a chassis switch.
So we could probably do like a whole episode on hardware for labs, but I think if we're going to do that, we should definitely have Taylor on here because he's the master of shopping for hardware. Like nice. I know he's picked up switches for like $25, like decent switches. Like he's like the deal hunter.
So, but one thing I do want to mention too is not only just like switches and routers. So there's a thing that Cisco uses. I mean, we're talking about Cisco right now. So, but the HWIC cards, HWIC cards. That was one thing when I first started. I had no clue what that was, right? And so I had to do some research on which card do you need because they've got all these different cards, right? They've got
talking like the T1 cards. Is that what you mean? Like
they've got they've got, let's see here, the 4ESW. So that's like a 4-port switch, right? So those aren't going to be. I don't think those are layer 3 interfaces.
You can't do routed ports.
Right. So I think the ones that have the routed interfaces are. Hold up. Yeah. So these 2 FEs, right? So that's a fast Ethernet with 2 ports on it. So these switches, these routers that we were talking about, like the 2800s, they've got those modules in the back that you can plug these cards into, and that gives you more routed interfaces on them so that you can just do crazier topologies and whatnot.
Yeah, I had done that too, Dan. I bought for $40, I bought a card, like a 4-port, card for just one, because those 2620 routers I had, I don't know if they had like one Ethernet port. They were kind of limited. So I bought, that. Trying to look for the name of it, but the same. I was able to add routed ports, which was helpful. They were only Ethernet. They were only 10 megs, but they worked. Hey, that's all I needed.
Exactly right. Well, and actually using 10 megs with your onboard 100 meg, that would give you your weights and stuff like that. Another thing too is, now I haven't looked at the blueprint on the new CCNA, but are serial interfaces still used? No, they've dropped that completely.
Yeah, they're not doing any serial interfaces or anything like that. I think everything's either going to be fast Ethernet or gig.
Stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Like all that stuff. Yeah, all that.
Just because they're not in the exam doesn't mean you won't run into it in the world, though.
That's true. That's true.
I haven't run into it in the world yet.
There's a lot of old stuff out there that.
But yeah, so just that's something to look into because you'll get in there quick, and a lot of these routers only have like 2 interfaces. And if you want a crazier topology where, maybe you have 3 of them or 3 or 4 of them connected up and whatnot, you can get some of those cards so that you can do that. And then another thing to talk about too is I've got this pulled up, cables, because you can buy stuff off of Amazon. I've definitely bought some cables off Amazon, but a site that I really like is it's called Monoprice. Yeah, we can definitely put this in the description. But like 80 cents for let's see, what is this? for like a 3-foot cable, it's like 80 cents a cable. I mean, that's
They're
super
so
cheap.
cheap, Dan. And guess which moron on this panel builds his own cables to this day?
Let me defend that a little bit though,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think when you're first starting out, you definitely should build your own cables,
And
right?
you can go to Monoprice and get 1,000 feet of Cat 5.
Again, they
Be
sell
building
in
them all
bulk.
day. Sit out by the pool, man.
I terminated so much Ethernet in the field as a tech that I don't want to lose that. It's kind of tricky, and you can screw it up, and there's some art to it, and
Oh, yeah.
you know, it's a craft. So anytime I need a cable at home, I make one because I just don't want to lose the skill. But yeah, Monoprice is much smarter. Just get your jumpers there. It's so
Yeah.
cheap.
Well, I
So-
definitely think you should build your own cables though, because I think
It's a rite
everyone
of
in our-
passage.
Yeah,
Yep,
exactly,
definitely.
right.
Yep.
But once you get past that phase, I guess, Monoprice, maybe not for Andy, or well, Andy could at least buy 1,000 foot of it.
Well, and it's more than just communications cables too, right? They do HDMI, they do
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
different kinds of stuff.
I make my own
fiber,
HDMI too, Tim.
I'm so
No,
proud
you
of
don't. Get out of here.
I did try to splice. I did cut an HDMI and try to splice it as a project at Comcast. That didn't work.
you.
I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, guys, we've been talking about platforms and how to get going with putting labs together. So, once you have your platform selected, physical, virtual, or a simulator using Packet Tracer, how would you walk somebody through getting started? Somebody who's got their CCNA OCG, do you just read about a topic and try to put some router switches together in your lab? Are there guided lab offerings online that you would recommend? How does somebody get started once they have their platform stood up?
For Packet Tracer, there are tons of YouTube videos out there that will like give you a topology, walk you through setting it up, show you the verification commands, and then there's like the break fix ones. David Bombal has a huge series on Packet Tracer Labs, and I know there's tons more out there. So I think the studying trifecta, right, is you got your books, you got your video series, and then you got your labs and a practice exam of some kind. So, any video series you watch is going to have some sort of labs to go with it, right? Whether it's, CBT or Pluralsight or, anything usually has some sort of like partner material that you can download and, walk you through the labs. And sometimes they even give you like the base code to put on your devices. So it couldn't be, easier to do.
Yeah. And also, so back when I was studying for the ICND one thing I also bought, like a book, was, I think it's called 101 Labs.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful because it's just constant labs of the different topics and whatnot. And you can take those, that's what I did, right? So I just took the lab that was in there and I built that topology on my physical equipment, and then I did the lab. So that, because I think like one thing that I run into sometimes is not having a scenario, right?
Yeah.
And when you have a scenario, a purpose of what you're trying to lab, that makes it so much easier than just trying to like shoot from the hip and, well, I'm just going to set these two routers up and try to get them talking to each other, But if there's a purpose, it to me, it makes it stick in my head a little bit better.
Yeah. When I went through Netacad, they came with lab books. So you would have, different lab books for the different sections to give you labs you could build. And I've seen them floating around too. People suggest different Cisco Press lab books or, and definitely like Dan's saying, having that different scenarios. I mean, you don't have to have a lab book. You could just mess around too, like if you want to, but I personally like a guided, especially in the beginning. Like I know this stuff, what am I going to do? And I just thought as you guys were talking, like I've been using, here's one thing I learned in a not too long ago in my home lab. I have been using a route map for 7 years and it's been working. And I thought it was working because I understood how it was working. And it was a deny all route map for, when you're bringing up a new circuit with an ISP and you want to deny all routing first, get it up, burn it in, quote unquote, make sure it's stable before you put routing on it. And I'm working on a YouTube video, and I won't get too into the minutia, but it was only working because there wasn't a second line in the route map. As soon as somebody, and I think it was on Discord, they called it out and they're like, add another sequence. And I did. Nothing was blocked anymore. So a route map that I've been using in production forever, that I thought I understood how it was working, it only worked because it was a temporary measure while I burn in circuits, and then I'd rip it out and replace it when we'd bring up routing. I labbed it up at home, and I'm like, son of a... I put that second sequence in, and all the routes bled in, and I'm like, oh God, I'm glad that happened at home and not at work. So...
Yeah.
And that's a concept I thought I knew inside and out, that I used all the time. So, that's why I love a lab, whether it's syntax, whether it's, you might think you understand how something works just because you get a result when you use it. You may not fully understand what's happening under the hood, and that lab will show you every time. And you don't want a lab in production. That's a bad idea.
Full send.
I don't
Come
know
on.
what you're talking about. Remember what I said? I just say yeehaw and send it.
Yeah. That's great.
So I think one thing too, I know this episode is more about home labs, but you kind of hit on it a little bit earlier. Sometimes companies, especially I would say the smaller the company, the less they have a budget for lab equipment, right? In setting up a lab. It's definitely been a struggle of mine trying to get, because here's the thing is, like, some of the stuff that we use in production is not cheap, right? And sometimes you have to have a copy of whatever's in production in a lab to fully, like, I'll give you a perfect example is ACI. You can use their virtual ACI. I forget what it's called. AJ, do you remember what it's called?
Yeah, I think there's an ACI emulator. Like you can run it. It's not full ACI. Exactly. It only does like certain things. It looks and feels like ACI, but
right. But in a network that's the size of the one I work in, it doesn't make
right.
It doesn't make, I guess, it's harder financially to go buy a whole nother spine leaf APIC setup. It costs so much money that I don't think our management would even approve that, right? But maybe in a company Andy's size, maybe that's worth it to them, right? I don't know, but what I'm getting at is sometimes it's a struggle, and especially someone who's starting out, maybe you're in help desk or something like that, you might not have access to the lab equipment at your place, right? And if you do, are you at a smaller company to where maybe they're not going to fund, some of the more expensive lab equipment? What are some of y'all's experience on that though? Like, I know my experience, and it's been a struggle. So, what about you guys?
I think the lab. What's funny about like labs is there's production, there's lab or dev, but then there's also the prod dev, right? The production development area. Or the production lab, right? Like,
I know it all too well.
The full send area.
That's well, no. What I mean to say is that it's dev, but it's the closest copy of prod that there is without being prod.
Okay.
And
yeah.
So even though it's a dev area, you can't go play in that area because it's production dev.
Well, I know that one too, because our episode that we were talking about. Change management, I've had to actually open a cab for a dev system that became prod, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, it's dev, it has it in the name.
So I say all that to now say, like, I work for a partner. We have a lab, but it's like a prod lab, right? Like it's the demo environment. Like if we want to do a proof of concept for a customer or something like that, like it's so fragile that, like, we want to get in there and play with ACI, but ACI is what runs this entire environment that we do all these demos and host things in to show customers how to do stuff. So learning ACI in this environment is not on the table. It runs on Hyperflex. And so learning how to stand up Hyperflex from scratch is not an option because it has to be running in order to like do all this. So really, like, you could really only do anything if it's a virtual machine. And even then, like, they're only going to carve out so much for you to do and play. So it just makes more sense to have home lab because then I can do, fire at will kind of thing.
Tim, what about you, man? Do you guys
what
have
do I
one?
always talk about, guys? It always comes back to culture, right? It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
where you're at is going to determine what you can get to work on.
Right.
Um, and if you're in a culture where they believe in learning and training and development, you're in good shape. I think something else that you can look at, and I think AJ was getting into this, is this is probably more so if you're looking into a new technology, but there are multiple VARs out there where it's more of a proof of concept thing. But if you can get in with a partner that they'll have lab environments that you can connect to, or probably not as much anymore, but some bigger VARs would have local sites where they would fly you out and you could go in and they would build up your environment for you. Or Tim Mack in the Discord would do that at Cisco for customers when they were going through POCs. So I think there's multiple ways to get going, but definitely for the people starting out, get in with that low barrier to entry gear, packet tracer, anything you can get your hands on to get going, and know that it's a marathon, not a sprint. You don't have to have the best lab in the neighborhood day one. Take your time, understand the stuff, and just get into it over time.
Yeah.
So
I
no
agree.
lab at work, Tim. Sorry, moving
No,
on.
I do actually.
I'm just messing with you. And I mentioned it earlier, Dan, but this big company that I work at years ago on another team under different management, we had no lab, and I'm pretty sure they had the revenue, but our leadership at the time, we didn't have one. I don't want to tell you we were labbing in prod, but we had nowhere to test, which is why I built it out at home, because I just thought it was very foolish way to operate. So, and then stuff would break and they'd get all pissed and start pulling back and taking away our ability to do stuff. It was this constant, I mean, that's culture, like you said, Tim, and it was just that particular culture. It was different leadership. It was a different company at the time, but we just could not get a lab funded no matter what. And it was very difficult to, now we can build and see what's going to happen when we roll out something or touch something or swing something. And that's nice to be able to see in the lab, but before it wasn't like that. And it was just not fun. It was not happy, fun times, because you never knew what was going to happen. You had no idea. You're like, all right, well,
you're sweating bullets trying to make it, implement something.
Always, every time you're like, well, we'll see,
Yeah, I will echo that. We were actually, in the last year or so, we were able to get a hold of NESX host, and we got Eve on there. And I have had multiple maintenance windows that I have been able to prep much better than I ever had in the past because of that. Like fairly significant cutovers that I have felt a lot better because we got the backing to be able to use that server to do that and set that up in shop. So yeah, I'm definitely thankful for that.
And there's no shortcut to gaining that confidence before the actual window, right? Unless you have that and you can run through it. It's such a great feeling walking in knowing, all right, I've seen this work.
Oh, definitely.
Unless we trip on something really strange, we should be fine here.
All right. So what do you guys think? What have we missed? Let's start bringing this together.
I think one thing we missed was CML.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wanted to kind of touch on the different virtualization, kind of platforms.
Yeah,
if we could,
for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So who knows about CML?
I do. I have it.
Awesome.
I was in it today. Ooh. I actually set up the new copy today.
Okay, so what is it? High level, explain to me, because I've heard of it. I think it's like as a service, right? You pay every year for.
Well, so it's definitely a licensed thing. So CML is Cisco Modeling Labs. It is the the successor to Viral, and I forget what Viral stands for. But there's a couple of different platforms out there. There's GNS3, there's EvenG, and EvenG has a straight up free community edition, and then they also have a professional edition. And there's definitely some worthwhile features in the professional edition. And I believe every year they do a Black Friday sale, and you can pick it up for a really good price. You can get a year and a half, 18 months worth of license for, I think, the same price as 1 year or less than 1 year. I forget how they do it. And then there's CML. So these platforms allow you to virtualize iOS images and Juniper images and all these other like network device images, and they run and act like real devices.
Mhm.
So much, in fact, that when I run a Nexus 9K in CML, it will crash and go to the bootloader. That's how authentic it is.
Mm.
So,
Question.
yeah.
Can you run Juniper? Can you run Junos in CML?
I believe you can. I haven't
Okay.
done it, but I'm pretty sure that you like anything that you can do in EVE-NG, I'm pretty sure that you can
Yeah.
do
Okay,
in
that's a smart
CML.
move then, if
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a smart move by them. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you wanted to try to do like a multi-vendor environment with Cisco stuff and another vendor, like I'm pretty sure you can do that. I'm gonna go research
you-
it after the show.
Can you do me a favor in your free time? If you can get BFD neighbored up and working across 2 virtual 9Ks in CML, I might buy it because you can't do it in the V9Ks in Eve.
Dude,
It will not
let's
work.
do it. Let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's play with it. I'd love to play with it with you.
that'd be cool.
So, the caveat I'll throw out there is that these all need to run on some sort of hypervisor. There is an option to run some of these on bare metal. You can run EVE-NG on bare metal. I'm pretty sure you can run, I think you can run all of them on bare metal, but they also come with a virtualization option. So if you have a hypervisor, either a type 1 hypervisor, which runs on bare metal, so you can get some server hardware, install a hypervisor on there, run some virtual machines. They can also run in type 2 hypervisors, which is like your VMware, Fusion. There's also VMware Workstation on Windows, and then there's a bunch of other platforms, open, free for download use. And you can import the templates for the virtual machines and start them up, which is exactly what I did today on my work machine. I had to lab something up, so I have a license. I was way behind on the updates, so I just deleted my old CML lab and fired up a new one.
Another question: do you have to install CML or is it like in the cloud?
So you have to run it.
Okay, you need. That's what you were saying. You
Yeah,
need to.
it's a virtual
install it.
machine.
Yeah. Okay.
I run
Gotcha.
mine as a virtual machine. I have a Dell Precision laptop for work that has some extra horsepower, extra memory, so that I can run virtual machines.
And does it take care of the the licensing issue that people run into? Like if you buy physical or you have Eve, you need the images, right? Like iOS, do they supply you with the images?
So some people will actually buy the license for CML because part of CML is an ISO that has all of the images on it. And they'll take the images and they'll run them in a different platform like GNS3 or even G. So they'll buy the license just to get the images and not actually run CML.
And I think that's a point that we have to make out, right? Like when you get GNS3 or you get EVE-NG or any of that stuff, those don't come with the images, right? You have to get a Cisco image or a Juniper image or Palo Alto image or whatever image you're trying to emulate. You have to go get the image. And that's the elephant in the room, right?
Because even with the physical gear, right? Like my 2620s that I got, my first lab didn't run BGP. I happened to work at a place and I had my CCO account and I could download it, and but yeah, I mean, and you're right, Dan. Anything besides Packager, like physical gear, Eve, GNS, like you need those images to run the software.
So I think that's the beauty of CML, right? Now you do have to pay for it, right? But you get all those images with it. So that's nice. You don't have to try to be like hacker and illegal and go download Cisco iOS images.
And I will say, like, CML comes with a lot more than just iOS. Like, it comes with iOS router, iOS switch, but it also comes with iOS XR, and it also comes with Nexus.
Yeah.
So
Nexus,
like you can actually lab Nexus 9K. I think it also has a version of Nexus nodes with 7K code in there too.
Okay.
So it's good stuff.
But
I think they have like a CSR 1000 as well, so you can do some cool stuff. There are licensing limitations. So there's two different versions. There's CML Personal and then there's CML Enterprise. CML Enterprise, if you host it in a larger environment, you can have a bunch of different people logging in there working on various labs. CML Personal is more for one or two people to work on something, and then there's two different licensing. There's just like the CML Personal, which will let you do up to 20 nodes, so you can run 20 nodes at a time, as long as the hardware you're running on it will support that, right? Like on my laptop, there's no way I'm running 20 Nexus 9Ks. Like even though it's simulated or virtualized, they're still beefy. So I would need substantial amount of hardware to be able to virtualize 20 Nexus 9K nodes. If 20 is not enough, you can do the CML Personal Plus, and that's 40 nodes. So you can run up to 40 devices in an environment.
And that's good to know it's single user only. I'm looking on their site now because back when we were studying for Encore, I was trying to figure out like a group lab that we could leverage. And I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think EVE-NG allows like not the community version. You have to buy the Pro for like multiple users.
Right.
And
Right.
So that's what you'd have to go to enterprise for, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that was one reason why like we did the GNS3 the way we did. We put the server up in AWS. That way whoever had the image could put the image on that server, and then we could both utilize it, right?
So you two could both log into that instance and lab collaboratively if you want. That's nice.
It's pretty cool. But that also bring what you were talking about, AJ. That brings up another point. If you do go virtual, you got to make sure you got the hardware to run whatever your topology is, right? Like you can't just go get a server that has 4 gigs of RAM and a quad core CPU, and boom, there you go. You can run like 30 devices on there. That's just not going to happen. These devices have to use resources, right? And so,
and this is like virtualization of a router or a switch platform, like as if you're running a router or a switch. So it actually requires a bit of memory and processor to run, especially if you want to do like a topology.
I can tell you on Eve, because I ran into it, the EVE-NG requirements for the Nexus 9K, you need 2 CPU cores and 8 gigs of RAM per device.
Yep. It is a hog.
It is a hog, and it adds up pretty quickly.
And so I definitely would recommend, depending on like the size of your topology, and not just the size of your topology, but like what Andy was saying, if you're running 4 Nexus 9Ks, that's not a very large topology, but you're going to have a lot of resources consumed right there. So depending on that, you got to keep that in mind, right? A 16 gig server or desktop, whatever that you turn into a server, might not be enough. I mean, it might be enough for the basics, right? But you just got to keep that in mind. Like what kind of stuff are you wanting to run? Are you wanting to run really advanced things? You might need more like 32 or 64 gigs RAM or something. I think I was watching Keith Barker on his Palo Alto series, and I think his lab, he's got like 128 gig RAM server. So he's got a pretty beefy server. So that can run a lot of different things. I've also seen people here in the chat, they've mentioned it a few times, the Intel NUC, the NUC, or NUC, or however you want to pronounce that. You can get different, it takes up, so Eric's saying it takes up to 32 gigs of RAM. So that's, that's pretty powerful for a little lab machine, because those little Intel NUCs are like, they're like these little computers like this big, so they don't take up a lot of space. They don't produce an insane amount of heat, because that's another thing. If you get a rack mount server and you put it in a closet or in your bedroom or your office or wherever you have your home lab at, those things make really loud noises. the fans are like this small, and
they use a lot of power.
They take a lot of power. They produce a lot of heat, and they're loud.
Now we're what are we talking about? Servers?
Yeah. Well, if you're going to run a virtual environment,
Yeah, I got a low power profile on mine. It's pulling about 300 watts at max. It doesn't get loud, but it sounds like a jet engine when it starts up, right? It's insane. But you're right. It does take resources, and you were making me think, Dan. The only thing I haven't tried, and everything we've talked about that I'd like to, because it'll help me learn, is I think I'd like to spin up an environment, an AWS or like a cloud provider, just to
Now
I'd like to learn how to do that.
You got to make sure though that you're like I'm not sure if EVE-NG, if you can spin that up in AWS. I would assume you can.
I think you can spin anything up in there.
Well,
it's the cloud, doesn't
it's just someone else's computer.
If the cloud can run, the world, and it can't run Eve, we got a problem.
Well, there are limitations, because if you're virtualizing, you're virtualizing a virtualization platform. So the processor has to be able to support that.
Yeah.
And that's where you can run into
Gotcha.
issues. And I think that that's one of the issues that Dan and I ran into when we were playing with AWS and GNS3 is that we were limited to the kind of iOS images that we could run.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That makes sense.
there is a little bit of a caveat there. You're virtualizing on a virtualized platform, and there's some weird shit that happens.
I like making a copy of a copy.
It's Inception, right? Like you're virtualizing within virtualizing.
It's a zip within a zip.
To hell with the cloud. I'm not virtual. I'm not building in the cloud. I'm sticking to my server. I love it. It's quiet. It doesn't but
Private
make sure
cloud.
that make sure that your home lab is not near any water sources. Because my lab has taken a few swims. It's still alive, but you would think the basement's a good place because the noise and heat won't bother you.
Water
But
runs down.
all your plumbing terminates in your basement, and you might have a flood. Something to think about when you're standing up your gear at home.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think, fellas?
I think we've done well.
This one? Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah.
I knew this was gonna be pretty big for all of us because
I didn't get on a soapbox, right? I know I get beat up about
You
being the
definitely
home
did.
lab soapbox. Oh, I did.
No, I'm just messing with you.
Here's let me put a butt. What do we say? How do we put a bow on it?
Put a bow on it.
Yeah.
I'll end with what I always say when we talk about labs is not so much anymore, but I guess I used to be much more verbal on socials and such about the benefits of a physical lab. And man, you want to piss off a certain percentage of the network engineering community, tell them that a physical lab is beneficial. And they just come out of the woodwork and call you every awful name that, hurt your feelings. So all I can tell you is, huh?
Well, I was gonna say that. I mean, that's a certain type of person, though, right?
Well,
Like that,
it is, but there's more of them than you would think. I mean, I know the internet's the Wild West, but
yeah.
I can just speak from my experience, and I can tell you that building a physical lab, I learned things that I would have never learned in an emulated in a virtual environment.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't know how useful they are in, I'm sure I would have been fine without it, but again, for me, I keep going back to that CCNA thing they told us that most of the problems you run into are going to be physical. And and maybe it's because I'm a former field guy, but I wanted to master the physical layer of the OSI model as much as I could so that I could work my way up the stack. If most of the problems are at the physical, I wanted to run into cabling problems and card problems and blah, 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 blah. And, even pinouts on, I was using the T1 WIC cards you were talking about earlier, Dan, because they're cheap interconnects you can add to, inexpensive routers. And I couldn't get them up for the longest time. And to your point, I'm messing with CSU, DSU clocking. And then I found that the T1s have their own damn pinout. It's not a crossover. It's not a rollover. It's not a straight. A T1 has its own pinout. It will never come up unless you use the specific pinout. So again, just one example of I think learning the physical is important. So for me, I think a physical lab is very helpful if you can afford it, if you have the time, blah, blah, blah. And we've made all the other points here. If you can't afford it, Packet Tracer is great. And, if you want to show you have experience when you're trying to break in the industry with a CCNA, I think that building a physical lab, for me, in my experience, is the best way you can get over that hump and show experience. So that's my bow.
Nice.
What do you got, Dan?
Low. I'm just same thing.
Ditto.
He did it well because I like one of his points. He was talking about a pinout. Well, I think in one of Jeremy Chara's videos, he was actually making a bad cable. Right. I'm not sure if you can do that in a virtual scenario. They might at this point now have a way to simulate that, but I don't know off the top of my head that they do. So there you go. You can create a bad cable in on a physical gear and see how it acts, right? Like you can actually see the errors and that kind of thing.
Right.
So yeah, I'm totally 100% in agreement with Andy on that. Like I think a physical lab is definitely the way to go. I don't like I'm not going to say it's an excuse, but I don't like physical lab is expensive. I mean, because you're trying to improve yourself. It's an investment. I think you should spend the money on yourself. Now, maybe the one way to argue with that would be like, if you're not sure this is what you want to do yet, then I definitely say, download Packet Tracer, start crunching away on the simulator in there. If it tickles your fancy, start getting some physical gear and get that going. And
I'm sorry,
and
Tim's
then,
face.
and then
sorry,
get the virtualization after that. So.
I can't look at Tim. Got me,
And
Tim.
I'll jump
Dan.
in there. If you work for a company either in the network space or you're in the help desk and you know the network folks and you get along with them, if there is specific gear that you can work on, even at racks in the office that you can just work on, there's a couple technologies that are hard to virtualize and expensive to get. In the Cisco space, I'm thinking things like virtual switching system and Stackwise Virtual. They require specific hardware, but it's stuff that's out there in the wild. So if you can get that to practice on at work, maybe before stuff's been deployed, or if there's some stuff on the shelf, take any opportunity you can. Even if you don't have the stuff at home, take that opportunity. So I'll jump back to, don't let a barrier to entry stop you. Get into Packet Tracer first, get into any of that stuff, the virtualized stuff, the simulator stuff that'll get you going, and take it as a marathon. Just go from there. You got anything else, AJ?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Dan said. Like you're investing in your future. I think the rule of thumb is like what 2 to 5%, something like that. You should take your income and invest it back in yourself. If you work in IT already and you work for a company that will maybe reimburse or provide you training, talk to them about getting lab gear. Sometimes that can be part of it, right? Like if they're going to pay for your training, maybe they'll help you get lab gear. Maybe they have gear at work that they're going to retire. And why throw it out in the e-waste bin when you can plug it back in and give it a next useful life, right? The other thing I'll say is limitations. There's limitations no matter what you do. They're all over the place, and you're going to run into them. If you use Packet Tracer, when you're using Packet Tracer and you start to notice the limitations of Packet Tracer, that's when one, you're learning and you're doing well, and two, it's time to upgrade.
That's a really good point.
I think a lot of people have this idea of camps, right? Like there's a physical camp and a virtual camp. Like there's benefits to both. If you can, only afford one, then I would say like, you got to weigh where you're at in your learning journey. How much money can you invest? Like I would say to buy a server and a license of either EVE-NG or CML is going to be the same as probably buying a decent home lab kind of situation. So, when you do the home lab thing, there's limitations to iOS, right? Like if you don't have the right iOS on a device, you might not be able to do BGP, or you might only be able to do stub OSPF instead of the full OSPF. So you're going to hit things like that. And then the same thing with virtualization, right? Like those are very vanilla routers and switches. You're probably not going to have a ton of interfaces. You might not have a variety of interfaces. You're not going to be able to do fiber in a virtual environment. So if you wanted to play with fiber SFPs and the different media types, like then, you're going to want to do something like physical. Like just really understand what it is that you're trying to learn and do and pick the best solution for you. I personally have a combination. I have CML on my work laptop and I have a physical lab at home. And depending on what I'm trying to do will determine which one I fire up and play with that day. So it's a wonderful world out there, and having these tools at your fingertips will definitely bring your learning to the next level.
Can we go around the horn as a final thing? And what do you use as your, in your home lab when you need to lab something? You use physical or virtual? I'll go first. I use virtual. I hop in Eve and I bang out what I need. And
yeah, same here, Andy.
I use a mix of both. I have physical and virtual.
Yeah, same.
Well, I have both, but what do you use?
Both.
More. 50,
oh, more?
50? Yeah.
I probably use virtual more now.
Okay.
But yeah, I still use physical every once in a while.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
AJ?
I've got both.
Which
honestly, it depends on what I'm doing, right? Like, if I'm doing data center stuff, I'll use CML because I don't have physical nexus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're not Taylor?
No, I'm not. I'm not Taylor. I'm not Taylor. My wife would probably kill me if I got that kind of stuff in my basement. So it's interesting. So today I had to fire up CML so I could work with some customers' code and try out some stuff. It was just easier to do. I only had like a couple of devices to work with. My home lab is pretty tuned for things that I like to learn and play with. So if I'm doing customer stuff, I typically fire up CML because then I can, delete the router, add a new router, or whatever, pretty easily.
Yeah,
and not mess with.
I that's why I love the convenience of virtual. That's all. It's press a button, fire it up, drag it in there, and you're running the code. I like virtual.
Yeah.
After I just went on and on about physical.
I didn't see a soapbox, man.
That's why I was laughing, because you said virtual, and I was like, you just got onto these people about using physical.
I'm 14 years into my technical career. I wasn't. I think it's a progression, right? I think that you evolve and
for sure.
what you need. I don't really need to learn as much physical these days, but yeah, it's just good. Great topic, and really enjoy. I'll always talk about home labs, man. I love it.
Yeah, anything to make yourself better. Well, with that, fellas, thank you all for joining us for this episode. Like, subscribe, follow anywhere you can find us. Get in that Discord and chat with us, help each other out. And we will see you in the next episode. Be sure to get down to Dan's for some world famous sandwiches.
Heck yeah.
See you later.
Hey everyone, this is AJ. If you like what you heard today, then make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcatcher. Smash that bell icon to get notified of all of our future episodes. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Art of NetEng. That's Art of NetEng. You can also find us on the web at artofnetworkengineering.com, where we post all of our show notes. You can read blog articles from the co-hosts and guests, and also a lot more news and info from the networking world. Thanks for listening.